All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Prime Robots in Disguise Vehicon. And yeah, this was the second Vehicon that was released in the Transformers Prime line. They did have that kind of like short-lived first edition section of the toy line, and there was a Vehicon in that. I've never owned that figure, so I can't really compare them. At least judging by how they look in robot mode, I've always kind of preferred this one anyway, so I've never really had the desire to track it down. But, you know, they both, I've heard that they're both good figures, so whatever, this is the one I have to go off of. But yeah, no, he's got a pretty nice little vehicle mode here. It's the, kind of like Batmobile-y kind of design of the Vehicons from the Transformers Prime show. This was another one that was like kind of weirdly small for the time. This was just like around that era where Transformers just started getting a little bit smaller noticeably. I mean, you know, it'd been happening for years, but this was like one of the big jumps was like around the Transformers Prime toy line where there was like a huge variance in kind of like size from a figure to figure around that time. But either way, it's a pretty nice little vehicle mode, and you know, compared to how small things have gotten nowadays, it mostly just like is in line with that, so it works. But yeah, it rolls nicely, and though like I feel like proportionally it's not quite accurate to how it was in the show, where it kind of gets a little bit scrunched up here in the back, whereas you know, there's like this slope back here on the roof, whereas like really, I think the cars in the show, that was mostly parallel with the rest of the car. But you know, it's just kind of how it worked for transformation, but it still has a good amount of nice detail regardless, like the pink lines that they've added as accent detailing around the car here. Maybe could have used a bit more, but it still works. He does come with a weapon. Now, unfortunately, you know, this one is another one where it doesn't really have any like integrated place to store. You're just supposed to peg it onto the side of the car here, which, you know, if you've watched this channel, that's always driven me nuts and I've never liked it, but you know, same song and dances with a lot of other figures, so nothing totally new there. But yeah, that is where you're supposed to store it. In terms of comparisons in this mode, just for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. So you can see he's a little bit smaller than Kingdom Sideswipe, but, you know, mostly on par. They look all right together. For the other Transformers Prime comparison that I've been doing, here he is with the Wheeljack mold with the dead end there. And you can see, you know, again, this was kind of a small figure for the time too, but is a little bit bigger than Vehicon, just in every meaningful dimension, just a little bit bigger, which makes this one seem a little bit small, but you know, still works. And then last but not least, here he is with the Jet version of the Vehicon, which originally was a, Arms Micron Japanese exclusive, but then they reissued this and breakdown, what I want to say, like 2-3 years ago? I can't remember. But yeah, they look pretty nice together. It's just a cool idea to like see the same kind of vehicle, which is like the land version and the sky version. And again, you know, this is another one that makes it feel a lot more Batman-y too, because this definitely has like Batwing energy to it. But either way, they look pretty cool together. In terms of transformation, this figure is kind of famous for having a really neat trick in its transformation, because it is honestly mostly a shell former. Like, to the extent that like a lot of like the Michael Bay movie designs are, where like the entire top part of the car, it just ends up being folded up somewhere. But the way that this one actually folds up that shell, I think is really interesting. So to start off the transformation here, first thing you want to do is just take the back wheels and you kind of just loosen them up and untab them here, and then you can kind of bring them out on this little like hinge and ball joint section here. These will be the arms eventually. And then you take the entire roof of the car starting at the spoiler and just unfold it like this. And then you can separate it. What I usually do is I just end up folding the spoiler up, which kind of like forcibly separates it just because it makes it a little easier that way. But yeah, then you've folded up the spoiler, then you fold up that panel on the roof, and then you fold up the windshield section into the front of the car, and you basically have flipped it up 3 times here. And then you can take these little sections, which will be the toes, unfold them, and then bring this entire panel down to cover it and complete the leg. And then you just take the fender here and just kind of rotate it down so it kind of sits, you know, a little bit more cleanly on the leg there. And yeah, I think that's a really neat leg transformation and a really neat way to like, you know, do the Vehicon design from the show, which mostly had no like noticeably visible car parts on it. And yeah, just make a nice clean looking robot. I think it's pretty cool. And then the arms here are also a little bit weird. You basically like unfold them or rip them off the ball joint. That's new. Unfold them here, and basically where the elbow attaches is basically going to be like kind of a somewhat sideways facing ball joint, which is a little strange, but they had sort of like weird gangly arms in the show as well. So it kind of works, but it definitely is a weird joint setup here. And then you just rotate out the hand and do that on both sides here. And then, you know, like I said in one of the previous reviews, a lot of the RID figures from Transformers Prime had like kind of a head reveal gimmick. And on him, what you basically do is you take the back like bumper section here and just pull it up, which flips out the head, and then you just rotate this onto his back. And there we have the Vehicon in his robot mode. And yeah, this is pretty spot on for how it looked in the cartoon. Like I think, you know, the fender sections here are kind of sitting off, and there's the back section, but otherwise it's pretty accurate. Again, you know, the arms look a little weird and they're a little bit thin, but you know, it's pretty accurate to how it was in the show. So, you know, you can't really knock it. In terms of articulation in robot mode, the head is on a ball joint here, though he does have like a sculpted neck that like goes back into the body. The actual attachment point of the ball joint is like right on the like sort of tip of the neck here. So when you rotate it, it does disjoint it like a little bit from where it naturally would go, but you know, it's mostly not noticeable there. He does have light piping. I don't think it works particularly well just because like the slit of the eyes is so small, but you know, you can get it going a little bit there. The shoulders for where they attach the body are on hinges, so you can hinge them up and down like that. And then at the end of that part is a ball joint. And the, you know, the ball joints on mine have loosened up a little bit over time, but you know, so I've had to tighten them, but you know, it happens. But yeah, you can rotate around the shoulder there. It does have a bicep swivel, and then the elbow joint is actually this sideways facing ball joint, which is really strange. So like you actually do get a fairly decent amount of range here. It's just like a weird joint setup where it's just like, yeah, I mean, you know, that looks pretty good. He's got a pretty deep elbow bend there. He can go even a little further than that. I mean, he can go really all the way around if he wants. But yeah, and then you've got this hinge here, the side, which, you know, you can use these kind of in tandem, and like the fact that you can still use the ball joint sideways facing is like, you can get kind of some neat poses here where like the hands can actually like rotate in ways that a lot of figures can't. Like you can actually somewhat more convincingly actually cross his arm. I mean, that's a bad example of it, but you know, you can actually, you know, reach to the other side of his body, which a lot of Transformers can't do. So, you know, kind of a benefit of having the weird joints and the really thin arms. The hands can just kind of rotate up and down like the, you know, using that joint for transformation. Nothing at the waist, which is a little bit unfortunate because there definitely could have been. Like there's plenty of room for it, but whatever. The ball joint, the hips are on ball joints. They can rotate forward, back, out to the side. It's got an internal sort of like mushroom peg thigh swivel there. The knees definitely bend a bit under 90, which is unfortunate. And again, there kind of was room for it to go a little further, but you know, not the end of the world. And then no ankle tilt or anything. The toes can't tilt up, they can tilt down, which I don't find is like super useful, but I guess you can kind of bring the leg forward and then bring the toe down a little bit. I haven't really found any poses where that's actually helpful a whole lot, but you can kind of like minorly adjust the angle of the foot that way. Bringing the weapon back on here, obviously it's just got the peg there, so you can just have him hold it in his hand like that. But we can also do, because these kind of, you know, the design of this weapon is based on the guns that like transformed out of their arms in the show. What you can also do is flip in the robot mode hand, and then on both sides, you can do this on either side. There's a little clip on the door here that corresponds to this this section here that you can kind of just clip it onto and give him you know, the more kind of like arm gun that they came out of their arms during the show, and that works fairly well. It's kind of sitting more on top of his arm rather than coming out of it, but still I think that's a neat solution to that kind of design problem. And yeah, unfortunately I wish that there was just like a peg on the back here that you could like store this. Like there's really no place to put the weapon in robot mode other than like just off of the shoulder, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I don't know. Because of the kind of lack of storage in both modes, I usually just end up putting this in a box, but you know, that's how it works with the figure. And yeah, another thing that I mentioned in previous Transformers Prime toy reviews is that like I've had a weird number of like asymmetrical QC issues on my Transformers Prime figures, and on him it's that this little blue line here on the waist was only painted on one side, so it's just black on this side, which is a little bit unfortunate, but you know, it's such a subtle difference that it doesn't make that big a deal. It's like you hardly notice it most of the time, but you know, worth mentioning. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom's Sideswipe, just so you can see, with an average size deluxe, a little bit taller than Kingdom's Sideswipe, kind of a tall, skinny guy, but I think they look fairly good together. Here he is again with Dead End from Transformers Prime as well, so you can see, again, pretty comparable remarkable there. And then last but not least, here he is again with the Jet Vehicon. And yeah, you know, it's always cool to see these two together. I really wish we ever got a version of this mold in this color scheme, because that's, you know, how the Jet Vehicons were in the show, was they were the exact same color scheme as the regular ground Vehicons. But you know, whatever. I guess they wanted to differentiate the toys a bit more so people didn't think they were buying the same product. I don't know. It would be nice, but I don't think it's ever going to happen unless they just make a completely new Vehicon mold, which is, you know, I feel like somewhat likely eventually, given what all the stuff they've been doing with like Legacy and Legacy Evolution and stuff like that. I think we'll probably see them again eventually, but it would have always been nice to have gotten, you know, this mold and this color, but you know, what can you do? But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. It's a really nice figure. I think that, you know, the most notable thing that people remember about this figure is just the whole, you know, leg trick with folding up the entire shell of the car into the legs. I think it's a really neat way to have the kind of like clean Vehicon design, because, you know, the Vehicons in the show didn't really have those like visible car parts on them. So it's a great way of actually accomplishing that in a meaningful way. But yeah, no, just a nice figure. Definitely, if you can get one, I'd recommend them. They're pretty fun. You know, good luck trying to army build them, because they go for a little bit of money, but still pretty nice figure. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Make sure to check me out on my Instagram account. That's toys.n.art. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Prime Robots in Disguise Vehicon.